Modulesh on Palestine. Moving on to private members' business and motion re Palestine. I shocked Richard by Barrett to move the motion.
Yeah. Okay, I move the motion. Taoiseach, obviously everybody is breathing some sigh of relief of the very temporary respite that will now be given to the people of Gaza after the massacre that has been inflicted on them by Israel over the last number of weeks. But I want to stress that that makes the government adopting the proposals in this motion even more urgent and important, because Israel has made absolutely clear that it intends to resume the slaughter of people in Gaza as soon as this truce expires in 4 days or so. And our motion contains a whole number of calls, but what I really want to refer you very strongly to in the motion is the question of genocide and the obligations that the Irish government have under the Genocide Convention to do everything in its power, as with all the 153 signatories to that convention. They are required to do absolutely everything that they can, all reasonable means available to them, to prevent the commission of genocide and to act against anybody complicit with genocide or guilty of inciting genocide. And that is what we are looking at when we look at the slaughter and massacre that Israel has pursued against the people of Gaza over the last 5 weeks. And it's not just us that are saying that, but it is academics, experts, people knowledgeable in international law and human rights who have said that what Israel has done in Gaza over the last 4 or 5 weeks fits all of the definitions of genocide as set out in the Genocide Convention. Because what genocide means is, and I'm quoting, any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial or religious group, involving such as killing members of the group, causing seriously bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. So we have had, for example, William Shabas, the world-renowned expert in UCG in the area of genocide, saying that Israel's actions fit the definition of genocide. We've had Raz Siegel, Israeli historian, and again, one of the most world-renowned experts in the area of genocide and Holocaust. We have had Craig Mockaber, from the United Nations High Commissioner of Human Rights, resigned on the 28th of October precisely on the grounds that the United Nations had failed to fulfill its obligation under the Genocide Convention to act against what he believes were genocidal actions and genocidal intent by Israel in their slaughter and massacre of Palestinians in Gaza. So it was clear yesterday that the Taoiseach didn't even understand the difference between the question of referring to the ICC, the International Criminal Court, or not referring, and the Genocide Convention. This is not a matter of whether you feel like, or it's government policy, to refer or not to refer to the International Criminal Court. This is an obligation that all contracting parties to the Genocide Convention have, to prevent and to use all reasonable means to prevent a genocide. And it's not just that Israel has killed 14,000 people, slaughtered them, including 6,000 children, displaced 1.7 million people, ethnically cleansed them, in effect, under a reign of terror, destroyed 275,000 Palestinian homes, and cut off water, electricity, food and health supplies to a population of 2.2 million, an entire population. But it is stated very publicly and clearly, and all of the experts in the area of genocide have said this is hard evidence, if you like, of the genocidal intent. They have made clear, government officials, military commanders, and prominent people in the Israeli regime have made clear of their genocidal intent by warning that they were going to cut off food and electricity, by referring to Palestinians as animals, by talking about inflicting a new Nakba, a new catastrophe on the Palestinians, and by talking of things like erasing the Gaza Strip from the face of the earth, and I could go on, right? There is an urgency for the government to act to prevent that horror, that slaughter and that intention to commit genocide before this truce expires. Otherwise, we will have, in fact I would say we have, blood on our hands for our shameful failure to stop this slaughter to date. But I am appealing to you now to take the action that is in your power and that you were required under the Convention to impose sanctions on Israel, on all of its ministers, its ambassadors, its representatives, and take all other action, sanctions necessary in order to prevent Israel committing and resuming the genocidal assault on Gaza that has caused such horrific, savage, barbaric death and destruction over the last 5 weeks.
Thanks. Last Ken Corlin. Taoiseach, last night the South African Parliament passed a motion by a large majority to cut all diplomatic ties with Israel and to expel the Israeli ambassador from South Africa. The Dáil should have done that last week, and we have another chance to do it this evening, and we should take that chance. But instead of doing that last week, what did the government do? They mobilised, they whipped their TDs to vote it down, but not just that. What did the Taoiseach do? The Minister for Foreign Affairs, the leader of Fianna Fáil. Well, after hosting the Israeli ambassador at the Fianna Fáil Ardèche, the Taoiseach went on a trip to Israel, supposedly representing the people of this country. The Taoiseach participated in a propaganda tour organised by the Israeli state, designed to justify the genocide being inflicted on the people of Gaza. And did the Taoiseach, when he was in the region, visit Gaza, where more than 13,000 people have been killed? Almost 6,000 children have been killed. More than 1 in 200 residents have been killed. No, we didn't. I'm interested in hearing him explain why he didn't visit Gaza. There's one of two reasons. One is that he did not attempt to visit, that he thought it was appropriate to visit Israel to see the impact of Hamas rockets, to point at a ceiling, but not appropriate to go and witness the destruction of hospitals, of apartment blocks, of refugee camp in Gaza. Or the other is that he did attempt to visit and that Israel said no, but that he had nothing to say publicly about that. So I'm very interested in finding out which it is. But Taoiseach, your trip to Israel was a disgrace. It was absolutely shameful to be participating in such a propaganda tour while the assault on Gaza is ongoing. Look at the tweets that were put out by the Taoiseach. Compare and contrast. Meeting with the Palestinian Authority, quote, "I expressed my sympathy to the Palestinian people over civilian deaths in Gaza." No mention of who caused those civilian deaths, who's responsible for them. Whereas when meeting with people in Israel, quote, "unreservedly condemned the brutal attack by Hamas, no difficulty in identifying who was responsible." Maybe that was just a slip in a tweet, a couple of tweets that were sent out. But it's not. Because there's an amendment, a counter-motion in the Taoiseach's own name, which is very clear in terms of condemning the barbaric attack by Hamas. But when it comes to all the victims in Gaza, what does it have to say? It deeply deplores the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza, including the death of over 11,000 people, etc., following Israel's military actions in Gaza. Very passive language. Later on, it also condemns the killing of children and civilians. Full stop. No mention of who was responsible. How is it, Taoiseach, that Palestinians just seem to get killed with nobody being responsible, nobody being blamed, nobody being condemned? And the government's response to all of this, our motion, will be to say diplomacy is key. We cannot possibly impose sanctions and seek to isolate apartheid Israel. But that, Taoiseach, is not the truth. It's not the real reason. And you know that because you can compare the response to Israel's assault on Gaza with the response by the Irish government to Russia's criminal imperialist invasion of Ukraine. Was the Russian ambassador Filatov present at the Fianna Fáil Ardèche, Taoiseach? Was he invited? Did you go on a propaganda tour to Russia? No. The Irish state expelled Russian diplomats and imposed extensive sanctions on Russia. So what's the difference? Is it the number of casualties? No, it's clearly not. What's the difference? The difference is clear. It's pretty obvious. It's the attitude of the United States. The US supports Israel. It gives billions of dollars, $3 or $4 billion a year in military aid. They have greenlit the current genocide. They've increased the amount they're giving, an extra $14.5 billion. Israel is a crucial ally of the US in the Middle East. Joe Biden famously saying that if Israel didn't exist, it would have to be invented. So the US supports Israel, whereas it opposes Russia, seeing Russia as a rival imperialism and seeing the criminal invasion by Putin of Ukraine as an opportunity to extend its own sphere of influence. And the Taoiseach, his party, Fine Gael and the entire political establishment see Ireland in the US camp. They want us to be more and more in that camp. They would like for us eventually to be in NATO, but you know you have to move slowly. So in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, you've not only imposed sanctions, you've even participated in military training exercises for Ukrainian troops. In response to Israel's genocide in Gaza, what have you done? Words, words, more words. Words attempting to respond to the attitudes of the vast majority of people in this country. Words responding to those who are on the streets. Words to try to make sure you don't pay a political price for the position that you're taking. But in terms of actions, absolutely nothing. Look at your counter-motion. Not a single action. Why? Because you do not want to offend the US administration. And Shannon Airport is at the heart of this relationship, both symbolically and materially. Is Shannon Airport being used to transport weapons from the US to Israel? The truth is, I don't know. The truth is that the Taoiseach and the government doesn't know either, because they refuse to do inspections. We do know that there has very likely been troops going through Shannon Airport to the region to assist in the US agenda of backing up Israel's genocide on Gaza. We know that there's been a significant 50% increase in munitions allowances, indicating an increase in troops going. And we know that the US is the biggest supporter of the genocide being inflicted on the people of Gaza. It is absolutely wrong. It is scandalous that they continue to be allowed to use Shannon Airport. Shannon Airport must be shut down for the US military. The final point I want to make is it's very clear. If you listened to the Taoiseach yesterday, he said the reason they're not supporting this motion, we cannot support the motion is because we don't include a condemnation of Hamas. That isn't true. We know it's not true because that's not all you do in your own counter motion. We know it's not true because last week you voted against motions which did condemn Hamas. Well, why don't we include it? Is it because we support the killing of civilians? Of course not. Is it because we support the taking of hostages, civilian hostages? Of course not. Is it because we politically support Hamas? Of course not. Why? It's because we do not accept the narrative that history began on the 7th of October, that all the killings in this year by Israel before then didn't matter, that the 17 years of blockade of Gaza didn't matter, that the 75 years of dispossession, of ethnic cleansing, of apartheid, that none of that matters, none of that is relevant. We do not accept that. And this moment must be used not only to push for a permanent ceasefire, but to say this is the moment to build a movement that is actually capable of assisting in winning liberation for the people of Palestine.
Gino Kenny.
Thanks, Tánaiste, millions and millions of people across the world have taken to the streets in cities to show their solidarity and absolutely horror what's gone on in the last 6 weeks in Gaza. And last Saturday, there was over 50,000 people in Dublin and Belfast that kind of went on the streets and showed their solidarity in relation to what's going on. And a whole cohort of people are being politicised in relation to what's going on in Gaza. And they see not only the hypocrisy of the Western powers, but also the hypocrisy of the Israeli state. And they see that their governments are complicit in their silence in relation to condemnation of the Israeli state. And that is not only now, but in the past. And the only comparison I can make in my lifetime was in 2003, when millions upon millions of people came out in solidarity with the people of Iraq. Because what was going to be subjected to the people of Iraq, and what we've seen was over 1 million people killed by the American military machine. And I say to the people that somehow believe that Israel was the beacon of democracy in the sea of despots. What democracy subjects the people of Palestine to 70 years of apartheid? What democracy kills 14,000 people in the space of 6 weeks? What democracy kills 5,000 children? Is there any questions? What democracy does that? And the only way, Tánaiste, that actually Israel can be held to account, and we have said this numerous times, is that it has to be held to account in relation to its war crimes, whether that's economically, diplomatically, or militarily. I mean, I spoke to you last night about, the deal that we have in relation to the defence forces. It has bought €6 million worth of equipment in relation to the Israeli defence forces. Now, you got kind of tied up on reason why we shouldn't stop that. We should stop that immediately. And Ireland should support the BDS campaign, which I think has to be re-energised in relation to the boycott and the isolation of Israel. I mean, it was done in the 1980s in relation to apartheid South Africa, so why can it not be done now? And we've seen across the world where workers collectively have taken action against the terrible crimes of Israel. We've seen in Belgium where port workers have refused to handle Israeli goods. Now, can you imagine the kind of knock-on effect in relation to the world, individually and collectively by trade unions refusing to handle Israeli goods? Because it seems that the governments of the countries that we're in and the countries around the world will not do anything whatsoever. It's business as usual. Now, are you telling me, after what Israel have done in the last 6 weeks, it's business as usual? Come on. You know it's not business as usual. We can't treat Israel like a normal state. It's not a normal state. It subjects the Palestinian people to apartheid, and it's a state of racism. And the only way the state of Israel survives is the perpetual oppression of the Palestinian people, and by the perpetual sense of violence and brutality against the Palestinian people. And the Palestinian people have a right to defend themselves and to challenge and resist against occupation. We will always stand with the Palestinian people, always. So, Tánaiste, it's so important that Ireland has a huge empathy and solidarity with the people of Palestine and all oppressed people across the world. But we have to stand up for the people of Palestine. We have to show moral courage and principle that what's been done against the people is absolutely wrong, and we have to hold Israel to account.
I'm going to have to, I understand, but please no more clapping, no more clapping, thank you.
Lascion Corley and Deputies, I move the counter-motion on behalf of the Government. It has been impossible to witness the events in the Middle East since the 7th of October without utter dismay